Hello. In the crown of Aragon 639 years ago, it was December 30th, 1387. My name is Jonathan Seyfried. I'm a PhD candidate in history at the University of New Mexico, and this is the Historian's Notebook, a podcast about how history gets made. Season 1 is titled Multcara Companiona. We're looking at a document from each day of the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violant de Bar. Let's begin today's document. Alright, folks, we are now entering into a different kind of zone in the story here. Thus far, it's seemingly been a kind of a humdrum, business as usual type feeling. Joan and Violant, they don't know that Père is about to die, that the current king is about to expire. It's unclear when they really find this out. Maybe they do have an awareness that he's been just unconscious for several days. I'm not quite sure about the information flow getting to Joan and Violant. Something definitely shifts, though, on December 30th. And that's because on the day before, on December 29th, the current queen, whose name is Sibilla de Fortià, she leaves Barcelona. She flees. She gathers up a bunch of her stuff. Her brother is there, and he helps to get a whole staff of people to pack up a whole bunch of things, including the jewelry, and they leave. They flee the bedside of the dying king and travel to a castle in Catalonia, one of her brother's castles, and hold up there. Why did she do this? It turns out that Sibilla had a lot of good reason to fear what would happen to her after Père died. I'm going to take you back about 12 years before this moment in 1387. Joan's mother, Queen Eleanor, she dies in 1375. Père is a widower. About 7 months later, he publicly recognizes a woman named Sibilla de Fortià as his, the technical term for it is concubine. The person that he is having a relationship with, but he's not married to. And this is a situation that is not as controversial as you might think. The status of royal concubines in Iberia is actually not as scandalous as you might think. There's a lot of people who actually prefer concubinage to a new marriage. Those who are the current power holders. Because when you have a new marriage, you have someone coming in from the outside, maybe with their own power base. They can really disturb the order of things. So, specifically, with Joan and Marti. They would be afraid that if Pere married somebody else who had a big international stature, and then the two of them had a son, that person could one day make a play for the throne. It's not an outlandish fear. Why? Because the exact situation I just described actually happened to Pere himself in 1336, when his father died. There had been a second marriage, and the young children of that marriage were used as pretenders in order to justify a rebellion that then Pere had to suppress in order to solidify his own authority as king. So Joan was actually okay with Sibilla. It's way better than having some powerful outsider who's part of a dynasty come in and become the next wife of the king. So even though Sibilla was of the lower nobility and had been working on sort of like on staff for the previous queen, and that seems like it would be a scandalous thing for Pere to start having an affair with her, it's actually not the worst case scenario by far in the opinions of a lot of stakeholders around the court. So things were going okay in the first couple years, but then in 1377, Pere decides that he and Sibilla are going to get married. And that starts to shake things up. Sibilla herself is completely aware that she does not have the kind of safety and security that would come from being the member of a prestigious family. Not only that, but she doesn't know how to read or write. She's illiterate. And Pere hires somebody to help her learn. So basically, she's in a position of real weakness in relation to a lot of the other power players around. And one of those people becomes Violant. In 1380 is when Joan marries Violant de Bar. Pere had wanted Joan to marry somebody else. And that's a whole other story, and it's really a bizarre story, in my opinion. But we're going to save that one for another time. For our purposes here, Sibilla is threatened by Violant. Pere is against Violant as even like an idea. he calls her, all kinds of names. I mean, not like directly, it's all like subtle, but it's all just kind of like digging. There's all these little kind of like, insults that are kind of traded back and forth. And over time, the dissension and the acrimony just grows and grows. And there's a bunch of little incidents where they're just kind of like digging at each other. Joan versus Pere, Sibilla versus Violant, and then kind of crisscrossing also. And I will say too that Pere's daughter, Joanna, she doesn't like Sibilla. And at one point, in a pretty dramatic moment, Joanna comes in to complain about something Sibilla's doing, and Pere, in front of the entire court, slaps her across the face. So the whole family is just really thrust into dissension with the way that Pere and Sibilla are acting, and then the reactions from the kids. So when Pere is about to die in 1387, Sibilla knows that there might be revenge wrought upon her from Joan and Marti and Joanna, the three kids. So it's reasonable in that light that she flees. By December 30th, Joan has found out about this. And what does he do? That is our document for today. It's been a long build-up. The document we're looking at today is in Violant's register, one of Violant's registers. But it's written by Joan. It's at the very end of a whole long register of documents that relate to what Violant owns in terms of properties and rents. The Duchess and the Queen in the Crown of Aragon, they have what you could call a portfolio. They are in charge, in a sense, they are the governing authority for several different polities. And actually, as a hint of some further things to come, the Muslim and Jewish communities, they're separate municipalities within municipalities, and those come under the direct authority of particular royal family members. And so Violant has a few of the Jewish communities and a bunch of other territories, and it all adds up to, I think a great word for it is a portfolio, a business portfolio, really. And so Sibilla also had a business portfolio. Today's document is Joan authorizing and ordering the transfer of Sibilla's entire portfolio to Violant. This is a long document. It's in Latin, so my facility with every single word in it is not so good, but I know enough to see what's going on here. And of course, I rely on the secondary literature. So this document, which is fairly long, it's 3 folios long. So we go from folio 197 verso to folio 198 verso in the register 1808. Violant's register, a document from Joan in her register, and it's the last one in this volume. So it's interesting how this kind of closes out the record of Violant's portfolio as a duchess. And someone wrote in there, it had to have been afterward, at the top of the beginning of this, Reginae Iolantis. It's in a different handwriting. So it's not from the script of the time. Someone later, maybe in the 19th century, wrote that. So Iolantis is the Latin for Violant. The document begins with the recipient, but the recipient is basically this far and wide audience. So what I think this is saying here in Latin is Noventer Universi. Okay, so I think what this is meant to say is to everyone out there, universal audience. Not quite sure what the OS stands for afterwards. It could also be a DS. But then we get into Nos Infantis Johannis. And this is the authorship of this official charter. And then in the next, at the end of the first line, we've got the SI. And then in the second line, Bilia for this. So that's Sibilla, the Queen of Aragon. And then we get into the next, right at the beginning of the letter, it's all going to Violant. And the end of the letter, I shouldn't say it's a letter, it's more of a charter. The end of this charter is, instead of saying the usual like date in, made in, we have quod est actum in the city of Girona, meaning this was enacted. So this is like an official action transferring all of Sibilla's properties to Violant. That is some drama. So this is like quite the way to start a succession, taking the current queen's entire property and saying it's no longer hers, it now belongs to the queen, the next queen who's about to ascend the throne as soon as the king dies. Okay. This summary has been just filled with all of these questions that have been unstated in the background. There's so much that I don't know. I really want to know how the information flowed. Like, how quickly was Joan and Violant, how quickly were they getting new information? What were the sources of the information? Who, besides Marti, was keeping Joan informed? Also, like, what kinds of worries did Joan and Violant have about the transition? Did they think that it was going to be rocky, or did they anticipate that it would be a pretty smooth transition of power? I also want to know, where were the children at this time? So Joan and Violant, they've got, I think at this point, 2 living children. The children thing is a whole other story I'll get into later. And then another question is, when does Joan start experiencing the symptoms of the illness that is going to delay his arrival to Barcelona? Historians, they differ on when Joan falls ill and also exactly when he recovers, but it's a serious illness that happens in January of 1387. We'll get into that a little bit more in the upcoming episodes. Before I close out today's episode, I want to credit a few secondary sources that have been incredibly, incredibly helpful as I have been putting together my understanding of today's document, and also the, at times, very difficult to figure out chronology and also the location of this period of the transition of the succession. So, first of all, an article by Núria Sierras Fernandez about Sibilla de Fortià has been super helpful. There's been a whole bunch of scholarship done by Yedo Ruiz Domingo that's been incredibly helpful. And also Zita Rohr and Claire Ponce have been helpful in helping me to figure out what was going on in these particular days. Go to the webpage for this episode on jonathanseyfried.net in order to see the full citations for those sources. Okay, there's so much more to say, but we will save that for upcoming episodes. We are just doing our sweep through the documents here, even when there's a juicy, interesting one like this. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Historian's Notebook, Season 1, Molt Cara Companiona. If you are leaving with more questions than you arrived with, I've once again done my job, because the motto of The Historian's Notebook is dissatisfaction guaranteed. Visit the website to see an image of today's document and to look through. There's a whole bunch of show notes for this one. And listen again tomorrow to hear about the next day in the first year of the reign of Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violant de Bar. In the meantime, take care.